point is, how does she shift away from Joe Biden's economy? Because when he was running, that was a weak point for him, a weak point for Democrats. So how does she separate herself when she's number 2 on his ticket and still serving in his administration?
I think it's really hard. There was a New York Times Siena national poll out recently, and it showed Donald Trump with, I think, about a 15-point edge on who do you trust more to handle the economy. That's about the margin he held over Joe Biden. So that really, swapping Joe Biden for Kamala Harris has worked for Democrats in a lot of ways. That's not really one of them. I think people just sort of assume the economy under Biden is the economy under Harris. I think it's really complicated. The economy is by far the issue that voters name as the most important to them. I think what's difficult, and it's a really hard thread, needle to thread or rope to walk, or pick your metaphor for her, is how do you sort of take the credit among liberals for what you did in the 3.5 years that you were president, while also finding ways to distance yourself from the things that are less popular among swing and undecided voters. And I think on the economy, that question is really, really challenging. And by the way, we haven't talked much about him, but Donald Trump is going to push her flip-flops on issues, particularly on the economy and immigration, really, really hard. Even if the moderators don't, we'll see if they do. But that should be his focus in this debate.
And let's say that is his focus during the debate. What should her response be?
I think immigration we talked about. On the economy, I think she can say, we put in place a bunch of things to recover from the COVID sort of, the dip in jobs and unemployment rates surging and all that stuff during COVID. We feel really good about what we did, but more work remains to be done. I want to do, she's talked about decreasing the capital gains tax, which, by the way, I think lots of people would like to hear who for whom the capital gains tax matters, who are not liberal voters, typically. I want to do more around childcare. I want to do more around education. Like, talk in policy specifics, because one of the things I think that's really important, this is like a big umbrella point, but I think it's really important, is people know what they think of Donald Trump and his policies, right? In that Times Siena poll I mentioned, 9% of people said felt like they needed to know more about Donald Trump. That's not many. I'm amazed that it's that high, but still. For Harris, it was about 30%. And I think most people want to kind of know more about what she thinks, who she is, right? She's one of the most known people in the country. People know she's vice president. They don't know that much about her beyond that. So I think this debate with so many eyeballs on it is a real opportunity, whether it's economy, immigration, healthcare, abortion, or just sort of her broader worldview.
That's a really interesting point, because when she was running for president in 2019, she definitely was running as a more progressive Democrat. Now, especially in that Dana Bash interview, she tried to show herself as a more moderate Democrat. So with all of these shifts over the past 4 or 5 years, how would you define Kamala Harris as a Democrat, and how important is tonight in her defining herself?
So to answer your second question first, super important. Right? You only get very few chances where, let's say, at a minimum, 30 million people watch. There aren't that many events other than the Super Bowl, which doesn't have to do with politics, where you get 30 million people in America watching anything. So very important, because this may well be the one time that lots of people tune in and now they're probably not going to watch the whole thing, but tune in even for some of it. How does she do it? And what is she really politically and ideologically? I think if you look at her record when she was a senator from California, she's pretty much a traditional liberal. I don't think she's as liberal as Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she's certainly not as moderate as Joe Manchin or John Tester from Montana, right? She is kind of what you would think someone who is elected statewide in California would be, which is a very traditional left politician. She is not, by temperament or voting record, particularly moderate, but that doesn't mean, again, I've spent a lot of time looking at her voting record. The average person is not going to do that. The average person is going to watch her maybe tonight, maybe watch her a few other times and make a decision. So to me, a lot of it, I hate to use the word vibes because it's so popular, but the reality is a lot of these things are vibes driven. It is, what do I think of her? Does she seem like the kind of person who would be good to represent me? Very few people are like, what's her position on trade? You know what I mean? Very few people are that policy focused. They're much more focused on kind of the overall sentiment that somebody gives off, as opposed to like, what are their policy positions on X, Y, and Z?